Hey, it's Ken with Article 6 in Jacksonville, Florida, Sunday, 12/3, I believe is the date. Heading up to a Dinesh D'Souza event. Also, there's going to be a Benghazi tribute, and Congressman Ted Yoho is going to be up there. I believe he's going to be speaking, as well as some other people. So we're heading up there to check that out and, shake some hands and represent the organization there. Maybe find some new members that are people that do, not people that just talk. So unfortunately, our political action team member up here, or political action team lead up here in Jacksonville, he is not going to be able to make it. He's been extremely busy with events over the last few days. I guess he did a radio program. I'm going to get some details on that. And also has been meeting with some elected officials and things. So he's doing a great job up here, Mr. Kenneth. We'll just leave it at that, up in Jacksonville, part of our political action team. I'm not quite sure if Joe, our co-coordinator for the Northeast region, is going to be able to make it or not. Originally she was going to. I'm kind of hoping she does. But she has some family matters going on that have been keeping her extremely busy. So we're trying to, carry some of the load for her and let her take care of those things. Nothing pressing, nothing to be concerned with. Just life happens. So we'll be up here, and hopefully we'll see you guys up there. Shake some hands, talk to some congressmen, and just see what we can get done up here. And I'll be back with you here in a little bit. For Article 6, it's Ken in Jacksonville, Florida. We got your 6. At a Crossroads out here in Jacksonville, Florida. You can see the Jacksonville Bay back there. John Birch Society's here, many others. I'm just going to go ahead and get in there and see what this is all about.
We have so much evidence about Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, $145 million, Bill Clinton taking $500,000 from a bank, tied in with all that. You have John Podesta. You have taking money. His brother Tony Podesta taking money from the Russians. You have Skolkovo, which is the Silicon Valley of Russia, where we have made dual-use technology available to the Russians all this time. This is the fake news. The fake news is that they won't even look at these stories. Instead, they are just so focused on, what Trump is doing, how evil they think he is, how horrible, and just won't even look at the Hillary and us. We're going to continue to try to hold these people responsible, advise them. Stephanie Jason is an international business consultant who has represented multinational corporations overseas for the last 20 years. She has extensive experience in North Africa and the Middle East, and has spent extensive time working in Libya, traveling there over 50 times since the U.S. sanctions were lifted in 2004. Stephanie knew Ambassador Chris Stevens. They were good friends and had the pleasure of working with him in Libya when Chris Stevens was the Deputy Chief of Mission in 2007, and later when he returned as the U.S. Ambassador to Libya in 2012. In fact, Stephanie was with Ambassador Stevens in Tripoli, Libya, July 2012, just 2 months before the Benghazi attack. Stephanie is a recognized expert on Libya and supported the Citizens Commission on Benghazi in its efforts to uncover the truth.
I'm very grateful to Beth Heath and the Benghazi committee, the Benghazi team, for keeping this alive, for year after year honoring these brave men and ensuring that the truth is told. I wish we would have some media here, but it's quite frankly no surprise we don't. So on September 12, 2012, before the sun rose, my phone started ringing from Libya, and many people were calling me to tell me the terrible news of what had happened in Benghazi. And in total outrage for what had happened to my friend, Chris Stevens, I started investigating it as a private citizen. And 3 weeks after the attack, I actually went to Libya. I was in Tripoli, there with the State Department, and I was doing a site assessment of the US Embassy in Tripoli. And just 3 weeks after the attack, and I'm walking around with the security officer responsible for protecting the embassy, and he's showing me all of the perimeter areas that lack basic CCTV cameras. My home has better security than our embassy in Tripoli 3 weeks after the attack, and they still had very serious deficiencies. So I said to him, why can't you get cameras in these areas so that you can watch the movement on the perimeter? And he said, well, the State Department denies our funding. You know what I said to him? I said, well, I'm gonna go back to Washington. I'm gonna open a lemonade stand outside of Capitol Hill. And gosh darn it, we're gonna raise money so that we can get proper cameras to protect our personnel overseas. Now we have Ahmed Abu Khatala, the terrorist who we all know was taken from Libya, brought to the United States, immediately given his Miranda rights, and held in a federal court, the trial just concluding. I actually went and sat in on the trial, and I was surprised at how easy it was. I was in DC for other meetings, went over to the courthouse, it's a small courtroom, walked in, and here is Khatala sitting 20 feet from me. It was a surreal experience, listening to the DS agents testify about what happened that night, and hearing the defense run through its case, trying to disrupt the timeline. And I'm looking around this small courtroom, and I noticed that there really is no one else there. Defense, prosecution, FBI, that's it, and the witnesses. No media. Nothing. It's as if it's a non-event. And I can't think of a more egregious and shameful thing than what happened in Libya, and to leave these men to die. And in fact, 40 Americans there were left to their own defenses. And after the fact, they pretend as if it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. Benghazi matters, and I'm very grateful to these type of events to ensure that the truth will come out. Thank you for that. So I get the pleasure of introducing the next speaker, Clare Lopez, who's a dear friend. I got to know Clare several years ago in the course of the Benghazi Citizens Commission, and Clare is a very distinguished scholar and national security expert, counterterrorist expert. She had a long history as an operative with the Central Intelligence Agency, and subsequent of her retirement from there, she has worked with a number of very distinguished think tanks in Washington and overseas, all of whom are dedicated to exposing the threat of radical jihad. Clare, since 2013, was on the Citizens Commission for Benghazi and engaged in a number of esteemed activities, supporting congressional task forces on EMP threats, national security, counterterrorism. She's a true expert, an extraordinary woman, a great patriot, and I'm delighted to call her a friend. Clare Lopez.
What I'd like to do with you today is to review a little bit about how Benghazi could possibly have happened, what we need to do about it right now to reverse the policies that were enacted at that time, and to make sure that something like that can never happen again. There is a document called the Presidential Security Directive 11, or PSD 11. This was the Barack Obama administration's plan to use the entirety of the United States government and its capabilities to support the overthrow of friendly allied governments across the Middle East and North Africa, and to replace them with Muslim Brotherhood regimes. Now, this document was published, I shouldn't say published, this document was written, was promulgated in August 2010. It remains classified, so I cannot say that I've ever seen it, and only those with the highest clearances have seen it. But its gist has leaked out over the years, and the general gist of PSD 11 is understood to be the empowerment of the Muslim Brotherhood, especially across North Africa, but also domestically, right here at home in the United States. And the Persian Gulf area, the Middle East heartland, if you will, was to be for the domination by Iran and the Shiites. So there you see a little bit of a trade-off. The Shiites would have the Middle East heartland, the Sunnis would get North Africa. But in any case, the idea was to change governments. The Obama administration, the Clinton Secretary of State Department were dedicated to changing governments in these areas to give them over to Muslim Brotherhood and jihadist domination. Now, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the time planned to use the anticipated transformation of North Africa and the entire region to bolster President Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign for president, and also as a platform for her own plans to run for president in 2016. So governments of Ben Ali in Tunisia, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, they were far from liberal or even fairly representative democracies, but they were helping the United States and the West to battle against Al-Qaeda, especially Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, that is across North Africa, in addition to which Mubarak's Egypt had helped to keep the peace with Israel for decades. Didn't matter. When the United States, behind the scenes backing, funding, training, and clandestine weapons flow from Qatar for the Libyan Muslim Brotherhood and its subordinate Al-Qaeda militias during the 2011 uprising against Gaddafi, entirely predictably turned Libya into a chaotic, failed state in 2012, the year after, with heavily armed jihadis running amok across the entire country, a cover-up, as you heard both Roger Aronoff and Stephanie Jason talk about, a cover-up was the Obama-Clinton default position. Despite repeated attacks against Western interests, including our own, in Benghazi throughout 2012, repeated pleas, as Stephanie said, dozens and dozens, 100 for Benghazi alone, for more security, for our mission there, they were all refused. It wouldn't do, you see, to let Americans, or the world, see what a mess Libya was because of the Obama-Clinton PSD 11 policy. And so our people there were left pretty much to fend for themselves, right up to and including the night of 9/11, 2012, when they were left to fight and die alone. Don't let anyone tell you that help couldn't have arrived in time to save lives and limbs. Help was never authorized.
Well, I think the case is being made that some investigations need to begin. My name is Roger Forrest Wilson. I'm one of the speakers liaisons for Turning Points in America. And I believe that now we're getting some of the information out to the American people so they understand the usurpations of the prior administration. And then at a very minimum, we ought to have some answers as to Benghazi and what it really represents. The next speaker is Mr. Kevin Shipp. Kevin is significant to this event because he's going to explain to you some of the links between what we refer to as the deep state or the shadow government and why some of these things are happening, and what you as Americans need to know about your government, because there's so much more beneath the water of Benghazi. If Benghazi's the tip of the iceberg, certainly the rest of this will make sense with what Kevin has to present to you. Kevin Shipp is a former CIA officer and anti-terrorism expert. He's held several high-level positions at CIA. He was assigned as a protective agent for the Director of Central Intelligence and counterintelligence investigator, a counterterrorism center officer, a team leader protecting sensitive CIA assets from assassination, a manager of high-risk protective operations, a lead instructor for members of allied governments, an internal staff security investigator, and a polygraph examiner. He was tasked with protecting the CIA from foreign agent penetration and the chief of training for the CIA Federal Police Force. Mr. Shipp functioned as a program manager for the Department of State, Diplomatic Security, and Anti-Terrorism Assistance Global Police Training Program. He's a recipient of 2 CIA Meritorious Unit Citations, 3 Exceptional Performance Awards, and a medallion for overseas covert operations. He's also the author of From the Company of Shadows, CIA Operations and the War on Terrorism. Mr. Kevin Shipp.
I want to begin this evening and remember one thing that's very important. And that's 2 deeply inspiring heroes that were involved in the events of the night and evening of Benghazi. That's Ty Woods and Glen Doherty. These 2 men are powerful examples of what every military man and woman should aspire to be, what every civilian considers absolute, true bravery and heroism. I want to think that someday, and I am absolutely convinced that their bravery will be etched in history forever as something that even young men and women can look up to and say, that is a hero. And that's what they were. They both were heroes. They fought the fear, went to the roof, and stood in the stand of a gross, amorphous enemy, and both gave their lives up for their country. And they left a legacy that will last for generations. I want to recognize them, both Ty and Glen, this evening. In secret, without the knowledge or consent of you, of us, the American people, and without the knowledge of the majority of Congress, the highest levels of our government engaged in a secret operation, essentially running guns and heavy weapons into Libya, circumventing U.S. and even international law. The Secretary of State, using 2 foreign intermediaries, avoided U.S. restrictions and assisted in the funding and coordination of an operation that was running weapons to Islamic rebels and extremists in Libya, Benghazi, and ultimately up into Syria. And the government knew full well these rebel factions included members directly connected to Al-Qaeda. They knew it. The information was there. The intelligence was there. Horrifically, many of these weapons and several fighters covertly trained by the U.S. in secret wound up arming and expanding the group that we now abhor, the group called ISIS. Libya is now in a state of chaos. Al-Qaeda is flourishing and terrorist splinter groups are everywhere. The President and the Secretary of State thumbed their nose at constitutional protections requiring Congress and the voice of the people to make these decisions in foreign intervention, and in their arrogance, considered themselves above the restraints of a constitutional republic. They were able to do this because of what I call the new form of tyranny, the modern tyranny. I call it the tyranny of secrecy. Government secrecy now cancels out, and especially in this case, the involvement of the U.S. Congress in serious decisions like this one that have resulted in the complete and total destabilization of Libya, Iraq, and now Syria, and facilitated the expansion of terrorist groups throughout that entire region. Like a shadow government, a government that functions in secret outside the Constitution, PSD 11, as Clare mentioned, is a document that is classified secret, withheld from the Congress, withheld from any input whatsoever from we the people, still secret, still classified today. And what we know from what is leaked out, was, thank God, the mandate to establish the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood in governments throughout that region. It was treasonous at the very start, done in secret, without Congress and without you, the American people. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton planned an operation to support the Brotherhood, the oldest terrorist organization in the world, and install it as the new government in Libya without any of our knowledge. We have to ask ourselves a question in a constitutional government that is so critical, and this is why we're in the crisis we are in today. Who voted to approve the transport of heavy arms, missiles, and equipment to Islamic rebels with clear connections to terrorism? Anybody in this room vote for that? Anybody in this room know about that? Who voted for the Secretary of State to secretly organize a plan to remove Muammar Gaddafi, who was no prince, but was now cooperating with the U.S., to remove him from power, allowing him to be killed in essentially what was a de facto assassination? Just allowing him to be killed, but just not doing it directly. Who voted for the President and the Secretary of State to facilitate a plan to install the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization in the government of Libya? Did anybody out there vote for that? No. Did anybody out there know about that? No. That is the tyranny of secrecy. Where was Congress, our Congress, the only constitutional representative of the people? Where was Congress in the decision-making process for a foreign operation that ruined the country of Libya, placed it in the hands of terrorists, and has resulted in a protracted war in Syria where over 500,000 civilians have been killed? Where was Congress? Who told Congress what was happening in Benghazi? Who advised Congress that they were running guns through cutouts into Libya? Violating the Constitution in that fashion is treasonous, and I have to remind us all that violating the Constitution is a violation of the supreme law of the land. It is a felony. It is multiple felonies in this case. We must never forget what Benghazi as an operation, as a secret operation, means. It means our government acted in darkness with absolute impunity, deftly using the vast matrix of government secrecy, which I call the shadow government, the secret government, the part. Some secrecy is good, we know that, in protecting some of our lives. I want us all to understand that the shadow government and the deep state are not the same thing. They are connected in the matrix, without a doubt. But the shadow government is the mechanism of secrecy and the secret apparatus that has been designed to function outside the Constitution, connected to the deep state mechanism. It has circumvented constitutional law. It has blinded the U.S. Congress. The U.S. Congress has the authority to regulate the intelligence community, the CIA and others, to regulate them through their budget. The problem is the CIA and other organizations classify that budget, so Congress has no access to what the money is really being used for. Now, there's a lot of good things I did when I was there, but I think it's critical that we abide by the Constitution and we stay with an open Congress and an open people, and let secrecy fall under that system and that system alone. Benghazi completely removed the voice of the American people from serious and far-reaching actions, destabilizing an entire region involving the significant loss of human life. So yes, we do. We have a constitutional crisis in America, and a desperate one. You can ask anybody in this audience and even outside, everyone knows in their gut that there's something wrong in Washington, D.C. Terribly wrong. So the time has come for change. And this audience right here is change. You all are change. it's so inspiring to see everyone here because the change is beginning, and I believe it's starting to explode. Americans are beginning to wake up to the crisis, to this constitutional crisis by the millions. And they're beginning to demand that our government return to the Constitution on which it was founded. Benghazi, a permanent reminder that we must continue to stand up and stand firm if we want to preserve the freedoms that we still have left in America. Millions of Americans made their voice heard in this last U.S. election, and they made that election shocked the world. Thank God. And it upset the globalist goal for destabilization of American sovereignty. Stop that dead in its tracks. And those millions of Americans that enabled that shocking event of that transition to happen in America, those millions of Americans are still there. Many of them, all of them sitting right here. And there's vastly more than people see or know about. And those numbers are increasing, almost exponentially. So stand we must, together, with the new resolve that our government is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, excuse me, and no complex matrix of unconstitutional government secrecy is going to stand in the way of our constitutional law. The tyranny of secrecy and secret government that is abused and misused by politicians at the highest levels of our government, it's time for that to end.
Howdy, everybody. I am from the swamp. You got to be happy about how it's getting drained. It wasn't probably the way we anticipated it to get drained, but it is becoming drained on both sides of the aisle, and it needs to continue. You know, SD11, where's Miss Lopez? Right there. I'm glad you had your gloves on. And Kevin, you too. SD11, I've never heard of that. I guess it came out in 2011, 2010. See, I went up there in 2013, never heard of it. You know, the slush fund that's going on, never heard of that. Ron DeSantis sponsored that. We co-sponsored that immediately. That's why it's so important that you people are here getting educated to educate us, unfortunately. You know, there's about 40,000 pieces of legislation, resolutions, or papers that come out. There's a lot of busy work up in Washington, D.C. A lot of busy work. It's not productive work. And we need to change that, and that's one of the reasons we ran against John Boehner, and that's why leadership needs to change again, in my opinion. And when the government oversteps the boundary of the Constitution, it is our duty, it is our right and our privilege that we change government. And that's, I think this last election was spot on. You know, I was up there, you know, and I know a lot of you know my story. I'm a veterinarian, never been to a town hall meeting, decided to run against a 24-year incumbent that had $2.5 million in the bank, 72% name recognition, I had none of that. But it was because of the grassroots that sent me up there, and I was at a meeting when we challenged John Boehner. You don't get a lot of friends in Washington when you do that, but that's okay. I didn't go up there for friends. I've got my wife with me. And this was going into that election year of 2016, and my class president, who's running for senator now in another state, he goes, you know, there's 40 or 50 people in Congress today. I don't even know how they got in here. In fact, they shouldn't even be here. I kind of took that personally. I don't know about y'all. So I told him, I said, Luke, I says, I'll tell you how I got here. I got 65% of the people in my district that wanted me up here. And I says, in case you haven't realized, Donald Trump is ahead of every polished politician up there running. And the American people are saying they want to change, and y'all better wake up here. So I'm glad he sent them up there. the only reason you're allowed to assemble, to say the Pledge of Allegiance, to stand up for our flag, to say a prayer, is because of the ideologies in this book that were paid for by the people like these people and their families and the people that came before them. God bless y'all and take care, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
I grew up in a different world, actually a world without America. And although I grew up without a phone, without television, without hot water, we had a car, but if you looked down the floor of our car, you could see the ground.
He's been described as an influential conservative thinker. He's a best-selling author, political commentator, and filmmaker.
The great man, Dinesh D'Souza, a patriotic man.
No longer would I say that I live in a rarefied world of intellectual debate. I've seen the upside of America, and I've seen the downside of America. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade the United States for any other country. At the end of the day, my enthusiasm for American government may have dimmed, but my enthusiasm for this country burns brighter than ever. Thank you very much.
The time we've all been waiting for. Give a warm welcome to Mr. Dinesh D'Souza.
I, for one, am very glad we're not living in Hillary's America. And it was close. I mean, you remember right up to the very day of the election, it wasn't just the unified force of the Democratic Party. It wasn't just Republican dissension over Trump. It was also the enormous power of the media. And you remember the media, up to the very last minute, huffing and puffing to drag that crooked hag across the finish line. And their highly constricted, dismayed, constipated faces when that didn't happen. I want to talk about the present and about the future, but I feel it's necessary to start by doing a brief post-mortem. When I think about Benghazi, when I listen to the things that have been said here, on the face of it, we have a complete puzzle, which is that we have a government that is charged with its primary duty, protecting us from foreign and domestic thugs. That's what we have government primarily to do. And you have a situation in Benghazi which raises the question, what were these people thinking? Could it be that they were so utterly indifferent to the lives of fellow citizens that they would just let this happen? Could it be that they are actually covert traitors who wanted it to happen?
Yes, traitors. Yes.
What actually is going on here? Now, it is so tempting because we're Americans, we're people of goodwill, we're tempted to ascribe these things to incompetence, to mere negligence and oversight. But that, I don't think, is what was going on in Benghazi. Now, we've had plenty of incompetence in American politics. We've had plenty of foolishness and idiocy. But I think if one had to award the Presidential Award for nincompoopery, we would have to still, even now, award that to Jimmy Carter. I mention this because, in a sense, we got Islamic radicalism through Carter. Carter pulled the Persian rug out from under the Shah, and whoops, we got Khomeini. Now, no one would say, I wouldn't say, that Carter intended this to happen. Carter was simply an unbelievable boob. And so in trying to get rid of what he saw as the bad guy, we got the worst guy. And this is, of course, one of the cardinal principles of American foreign policy. In getting rid of the bad guy, try to make sure you don't get the worst guy. These invertebrate Republicans are all around us. They're all trying to undermine Trump. At the core of it, what drives them is fear. Fear. Because we'll say things, and over the last 2 years, people would say to me, Dinesh, what's the deal with the Congress? What's the deal with Boehner? What's the deal with McConnell? Those guys are such unbelievable wimps. Well, the question I ask is, what makes those people wimps? Why do they act in the way that they do? And the answer is, they are terrified of the media. The media has the power to disgrace, to humiliate, to destroy. Now, Trump has this unbelievable ability to survive this attack, stand in the throes of the storm, smile, fire back. Fire back. He's the most dangerous counterpuncher since Reagan. And people say all the time, I mean, these are the Republicans, they go, oh, the problem with Trump is he's always on Twitter. Take away his Twitter. And I'm thinking, and do what? Give it to you? What would you do? But the point is that a lot of these other Republicans realize that they can't go through what Trump goes through. They don't know how to fight that kind of fight. And if the media puts them in the sights for 3 months and they are subjected to withering attack, their careers would be so destroyed that their own side would bury them. And so their political movements are very similar to the sort of antelope on the Nature Channel. And that is that you look around hoping that some other antelope will be eaten, so that the spotlight doesn't fall on you. The cheetah's gaze doesn't fall on you. This is the state of the Republican Party right now. Isn't it amazing? We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the presidency, and yet it seems even now that we're on the defensive. It seems even now that these investigations are focused on us. Why aren't we investigating them? What's the deal with our Justice Department?
Yes.
I mean, to tell my own story in a nutshell, I went down to Kenya, kind of puzzled by Obama. I had this intuition that he wasn't this sort of civil rights guy, he wasn't sort of the modern Rosa Parks. And so I go down to Kenya and meet and go to his family homestead. I'm entertained by his grandmother. Incidentally, Obama has 5 grandmothers. His grandfather was a polygamist. So here I am on the family plantation. I meet with Obama's brother, who lives, by the way, in a sort of hut in the slums of Nairobi. And so I got a window into Obama's world. And truth be told, I ticked him off by making the movie, Obama's America, 2016. Now, on social media, people say, well, gee, Dinesh, what makes you think that Obama pays any attention to you or your silly movie? Well, shortly after the film came out, vituperative attacks on me began to appear on a website called BarackObama.com. And so, once I stood in a courtroom in New York City and heard the words United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza, I recognize this is a case where the empire is striking back. In other words, this is a case where this government is going to use the full power of the state against its political opponents. Now, by the way, this is actually the essence of fascism. Fascism. It's not even those little mama's boy Antifa guys who have crawled out of Bernie's basement, put on their silly outfits, look, they got their bike lock, you know, or their breakfast fork. I mean, those guys are a nuisance, but the real deep state is not Antifa. At Berkeley, the most dangerous man is not Antifa, it's the mayor of Berkeley who's a member of one of the Antifa groups. He's the guy who calls off the cops and unleashes this kind of orgy of violence. I'm much more scared of the Hollywood bosses who have the chance to destroy the career of a young screenwriter, or the academic deans who will ruin a young conservative academic, or a government led by Obama and Hillary who will use the weapons of the state, the FBI, the CIA, the Justice Department, deploy the SWAT teams of the government against their political opponents. They do this. We don't. So right here we have a sort of disproportion between our side and their side. And this, by the way, stretches through all the organs of the government. Even consider the Supreme Court. Right now, the Supreme Court should be overwhelmingly on our side. Out of 9 votes, it should be 6-3, if you simply go by Republican or Democratic nominees. But the problem is, we can't go by that. The other side can count with Euclidean certitude on its votes. 4 votes for sure are in the bag. We can't. How's Anthony Kennedy feeling today? Hey, we got Kennedy. Whoops, we lost Roberts. What this means is that their side, their court nominees are acting as loyal Democrats. And our court nominees are considering every case on the merits. Once again, I'm merely drawing attention to the disproportion of commitment. Social media. If I go on social media, put out a tweet right now, 10 leftists will be on my Twitter feed in seconds, attacking me in every merciless conceivable way. They'll attack what I say, they'll attack what I look like, they'll attack my family, they'll do everything they can to demean me and drive me from public life. Now, we don't do this. If Nancy Pelosi goes on Twitter, we don't have 10 guys who immediately jump on and begin to blast her, humiliate her, make fun of her looks, make fun of her family. I mean, we don't think like this. I mean, I do, but generally, in other words, well, I guess what I'm saying is we are still fighting the gentleman's fight of the 1980s. That's our politics. This is a little bit why so many Republicans are uncomfortable with Trump. Because they feel they want to live in the Reagan era, in which Reagan and Tip O'Neill could have some political squabbles in the day, but then go out for a Guinness in the evening. They didn't actually do that, but it was conceivable they could. There was a certain kind of camaraderie in American politics. And look, whether we like it or not, this camaraderie now is gone. And I say, we have to recognize this. Begin to recognize the configuration of forces now, and we can make a real difference. Now, Trump, I think, is what we need for the moment. He is our man right now. quite frankly, I don't think there's another person who could do what he does right now. No. But he's also besieged on his own side. He's besieged even in the White House. And he needs allies. And he needs allies who can get information out. Now, I mentioned the power of the media. It is true that we have been, as conservatives, as Republicans, we have been a little bit negligent in letting the other side become so dominant in academia and the media and the whole entertainment industry, which includes Hollywood, but it also includes Broadway and the music industry. Look at comedians. I mean, they've got Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, Colbert, John Oliver, Ellen, Rosie O'Donnell. You go down and down the list. We have almost nothing to compete with that. And a lot of young people get their political ideas, forget about their sense of humor, from these dudes. So we are in a situation where we need to use the weapons at hand. And by the way, one of those weapons is social media. If you're not on social media, you should be. Because it makes you into a mini publisher. It enables you to generate information and share it. People go, well, I only have 20 friends on Facebook. Well, yeah, but they've got 20 friends on Facebook. So there's a multiplying influence that makes you more powerful than you otherwise would be. Lincoln said, America is ruled by public opinion. But he did not mean that America is ruled by the opinions of the public. Amazingly, the opinions of the public only matter every now and then. The American public, the ordinary guy, lives in a fog. He only votes once every 2 or 4 years if it's not raining. But what Lincoln meant is that there is another group of people, a subset of the electorate, that is actually hands-on. And today that would mean the people who are bloggers, and the people who are delegates, and the people who write their congressmen, and the people who are on social media. In other words, the people who actually are informed, and the people who actually care. That's us. And what this means is that those of us in this room, a few hundred of us, but nevertheless, we have the chance to make a big impact. If we fight tough, and if we fight creatively, and if we use our influence. Now, most people do not use their influence. They use maybe 5% of the influence that they have.
Back in 1987, and waited 11 years to become a citizen. I'll never forget the Tuesday morning back on March the 5th, 1998, when I raised my right hand and pledged my allegiance to the United States of America. I was no longer a British subject. See, in Great Britain, my British passport said British subject. Here in America, my passport says citizen. There is a vast difference. I'm also proud to have assimilated as an American. God bless the American blacks, but they are not Africans, they are Americans. You're Americans. And I long for the days when we are truly one nation, indivisible. Indivisible. You see, people as people, indivisible. I'm praying for my Congressman, Ron DeSantis, who's a great friend of mine, that he will have the courage to lead a charge for one nation, indivisible. If not, God will help me in 2020 to run for Congress myself.